Jake is co-founder and executive chairman of Team Rubicon, a nonprofit organization that deploys military veterans to disaster zones. Jake served in Iraq and Afghanistan as a scout sniper after graduating at the top of his class at boot camp, the School of Infantry and Marine Scout Sniper School. Paul served as an Army First Lieutenant and Infantry Rifle Platoon leader in Iraq and was awarded a United States Army Commendation Medal for his service. Paul is the founder and president of Righteous Media and host of the Independent Americans podcast. Guys, I'm so happy to have you both on the show today on this historic day, on the morning after the final troop left Afghanistan after nearly 20 years of war. Jake, I'll start with you. Given your long experience, not just of service in theater, but all the work you do with veterans since then, what are you thinking about today?
Yeah, I think I'm probably joining many veterans across the United States today, wondering how I should be feeling. You know, I had a brief Zoom call yesterday with a couple of snipers that I served with in Afghanistan, and there was just a lot of discussion about how should we be feeling in this moment. Honestly, I think I'm still trying to process everything that's happened over the last 2 weeks and also, of course, over the last 20 years.
Paul, you, of course, founded Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, the prominent post-9/11 veterans group. What are you hearing from your fellow veterans? What are you hearing from your community today?
Yeah, I think my friend Jake nails it. Willie, I think everybody's processing. The country is processing, the world is processing, but for the American veterans, we're processing it in a very personal, very visceral way. And I think there's a lot of pain. And we've got to address the fact that it's been a painful 20 years. The withdrawal has been exceptionally painful. It's been mismanaged in many ways. It's really hurtful to people to see us leaving in this way. That's a rush where our government's negotiating with the Taliban and we're leaving hundreds of thousands potentially of our allies behind is very painful. And I think what I'm left with is Joe Biden may say Afghanistan's over for him and he may say it's over for the military, but it's not over for the veterans that served there. It's not over for everyone who served since 9/11, and it's definitely not over for the Afghan people. For them, the worst may be just beginning.
Yeah, I want to ask you more about that, Paul. I mean, so many politicians and people in this country get to turn a page. They get to see the photo of the last American soldier boarding that plane. But for the 800,000 who served in Afghanistan at some point over the last 20 years, this is an ongoing war. This is a war that they deal with each and every day, whether the scars are visible or invisible. This is something they will live with for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really, really hard time. I think the stress on our military, on our veterans, and on the extended military family is the highest I've ever seen since 9/11. We're binding together and we're looking out for each other. We've got incredible leaders like Jake that are leading us forward. But I think there's a real need for closure, and we're probably never going to get that. But in the meantime, I think we want to see some accountability and not just tough talk from a president about how he's going to launch a strike against ISIS-K, but who's going to be held accountable in Washington for the failures that we all saw unfold over the last couple of weeks. And I think the other challenge is, what's our next mission? We want people to understand that it shouldn't become Forgotistan. We need the American public to stay focused on that place, even if our government does not. And there's a digital Dunkirk that's developed over the last couple of weeks. Jake and others have been leading that. That needs support, because our next mission is resettling all these Afghan allies, all these children that you're showing on screen. They need our arms wrapped around them, and they need to be resettled in this country and around the world. And I think that's the next mission that the president, if he were smart, would articulate, especially for our veterans who need that next mission and need a way to know we're not leaving our friends to die.
Jake, to that point, we had Kristen Rouse on the show in our last hour. She's on the board of IAVA, served 3 tours in Afghanistan, and she was passionate, to say the least, about the need to get some of these Afghan wartime allies, interpreters, the kind of people you both worked with during your time serving in the military, to get them out of the country, and the fact that they feel abandoned right now, that they had an implicit or explicit promise that they'd be taken care of if they sacrificed to work with American troops. So what are you hearing about efforts, ongoing efforts, to get some of those people out of Afghanistan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, America, I guess you could say we can lose this war, but we can't afford to lose our integrity in the process. And, you know, as Paul mentioned, we've already lost so much credibility in the way that this has unfolded over the last 2 weeks or 4 weeks. We cannot afford to once again leave our allies on the battlefield. We did it several years ago in Iraq with the Kurds, who fought so ferociously, so bravely, in the face of that threat as ISIS tore across that country. For the last 2 decades, hundreds of thousands of Afghans have put their lives on the line. And these men and women, they were often serving, on the front lines alongside our troops, in the thick of it, in these firefights, putting their lives on the line to pull our wounded soldiers, Marines, and sailors out of these situations. They were brothers in arms. They're transferring back to the United States. We cannot afford to fumble this here at home. I know I'm proud to say that Team Rubicon is working in partnership with the DOD and DHS and the State Department to assist with this resettlement effort here in the United States. We're currently supporting DOD installations in 3 states. We anticipate that that's going to grow significantly over the next several weeks and months. Ultimately, this will be out of the headlines within 7 to 14 days, but it's going to be 7 to 14 months until these Afghans are moved off these DOD installations, until they're integrated into our communities, until they find jobs, until they get banks and get their children in schools. I don't know a single American who can look at the photos of these Afghans walking through these airports, these young children holding their mother's hands, and can't have compassion and sympathy for what they have endured, and can't just open our arms to these people, these human beings, and welcome them into the United States of America to hopefully become a part of the fabric of our communities. I know that Team Rubicon is going to do everything it can to ensure that that happens.
Paul, Mike Barnacle's here with a question for you. Mike?
Paul, you graduated from Amherst College. Jake graduated from the University of Wisconsin. You had many options with your lives upon graduation, but both of you enlisted. You, Paul, in the Army, Jake in the Marine Corps. And now I'm wondering, 20 years we've been in Afghanistan. We have buried our dead. We have cared for our wounded, perhaps not well enough, and the cost of that care is going to go on for decades. So I'd like both of you, if you could, reflect on the fact that while we were in Afghanistan, as you enlisted in your 2 different services to this country, we had perhaps a majority of Americans who have never met a veteran of this war, who have never encountered the grief, the pride, the relief that comes with having someone serving and someone surviving. If you could reflect on that for just a moment, both of you. Paul, you first.
Sure, Mike. Well, I'm actually at Amherst again now. I'm now here 20 years later teaching a class on 9/11. The 20th anniversary of 9/11 is coming up, and most of the kids in my class weren't even born yet. So now I'm a keeper of the flame. I've got to explain to them what that was like and really force them to try to think about that idea of never forget. Everybody said never forget all the time. Well, I don't want them just to never forget about 9/11. I want them to never forget that for 20 years, most of the country didn't pay attention to a place where our friends were dying. For 20 years, there was no congressional oversight. For 20 years, politicians made promises that they couldn't deliver on. And for 100 years or more, this country is going to be paying for it in terms of the way we take care of our veterans, in terms of our foreign policy, in terms of the human wreckage. This is a point for the country to remember our humanity. And the politics has really gotten blurred in the last couple weeks, and I've been surprised by how many people are dismissive of the humanity. And I think, to Jake's point, there are plenty of kids who got out and who were walking through airports and are resettling, but there are plenty who didn't get out and are there right now. And we need to step up again and save them. Even if our president won't, even if our Department of Defense won't, the American people have done it for the last couple weeks, and we need to do it again. That's the call to action that I felt after 9/11, and that's a call to action that I feel now, and I want to issue to everyone else watching.
Yeah. And Mike, I would just add, I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 2005. I wanted to serve alongside my fellow Americans. And I served 4 years, 2 combat tours, during the surge in Iraq in 2007, in Afghanistan in 2008. I still wear every single day a bracelet on my wrist with 4 names of 4 of the Marines that I lost overseas. And, I think I spend the last, 24 hours thinking about whether or not America deserves those men that I lost. And frankly, a lot over the last 20 months in this country has left me really believing that America doesn't deserve its men and women in uniform. They're too good. They're too loyal. They're too brave. And, often I don't think that we're living up to what America can and should be. And I think that that's really tragic for me to see, because so many of my fellow Americans left so much of themselves, whether they died or were wounded on that battlefield. They left a part of themselves overseas. And as they've come home, I don't necessarily think that America's always living and reflecting the values that they wanted to defend.
And we're talking to two of the very best of them right here, right now. Jake, before we let you guys go, I want to ask you about Team Rubicon's efforts down in Louisiana across the Gulf Coast in response to Hurricane Ida. For people who don't know, Team Rubicon is a group of veterans who charge in immediately to begin helping with relief efforts, clean up, getting people out. What does it look like down there for Team Rubicon?
Yeah, well, the devastation is near total. Team Rubicon is on the ground. We're embedded with search and rescue teams, helping to clear roads for them as they go out and execute their life safety mission. We're deeply embedded in the Emergency Operations Center across parishes in Louisiana and several counties in Mississippi. We're prepping to move a large-scale response in from our office in Houston, Texas. We'll do so, and we anticipate that we'll be working in Louisiana and southwest of Mississippi, likely for the next several months as we try to help this community recover. Unfortunately, this is hitting at a time when Louisiana and Mississippi are hitting, near all-time record highs for their COVID surges. And so this is going to dramatically complicate our efforts, obviously, but it's also going to put further strain in an already almost broken system. So, Americans can't forget their neighbors down in the South. We need all Americans to chip in and do their part here, whether that's donating time, money, or resources. So appreciate the opportunity.
And if people do want to help out, they can go to the Team Rubicon website. Guys, great conversation. You two are the best of America, and I'm proud to call you friends. Thank you for continuing with your service to this country. Jake Wood, Paul Reichoff. That does it for us this morning. We will be back here tomorrow morning. Stephanie Rule picks up the coverage after a final quick break.